Where might you see a muddy bicycle? I see a mix of some successes and quite a few mistakes, which I'm here to go over with you today, because you already know. It's typical of me to go and try things out at races, during race preparation, and then draw conclusions. Go back to the workshop, analyze everything, and share it with you. So I go through the tough times while you just take notes to improve things, right? Has this whole process of adapting to the gravel bike been very interesting? Of changing configurations to find the components and the setup that I thought was most suitable for this Traka 200. Very demanding when it comes to choosing how to set up the bike. It's not only the 200-kilometer distance, but also the 2,500 meters of elevation and changing terrain. And what if we add the rain that fell on us to that? Not during the race, but in the days before, which made the conditions a bit wilder. Well, it has been very interesting. So in this video, I'm going to start by talking about everything that went well for me. Then I'll talk about the mistakes I made, which I think are very interesting to learn from. And above all, because there's one mistake that brands are hardly ever going to tell us about directly. I think for now, it's a bit of a taboo in the industry, and I want to shed some light on that. And finally, a couple of interesting things I want to show you. How much the bike weighs at the end of the race and what pressure it's at. What's the difference in tire pressure from when I started until I finished the race? Well, we're going to cover all of that in today's video, and I'll be talking about it throughout. Gravel. From a competition perspective, you know, there's adventure, there's bikepacking, and many different types of gravel riding. Today, obviously, we're always going to talk from the competition perspective. And we're talking about things that worked out well for me or that I think I got right to start with. And it's pretty obvious. It has to do with the frame, with BH's proposal, with this Gravel X, and specifically with the SRS, which is this system that at first we might think is just for absorbing vibrations. Since it has a small articulated part up here, which gives us about 3 to 5 millimeters of travel, if we can put it that way. Helped by the flexing of the stays, you can see that it has a little hole right down there on both stays so that it can flex. And at first, is it designed so that it somehow absorbs the irregularities of the terrain to delay the onset of fatigue? But I found another very positive aspect, and that's the traction it gives to the rear wheel, which is very necessary in gravel. With such narrow tires and in situations with steep slopes where we could encounter mud or loose stones, that extra traction seemed very interesting to me. Other brands have taken the opposite approach. They've started to add, let's say, suspension or the ability to absorb vibrations to the front part of the bike, like BMC with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, like Specialized did back in the day with the first Diverge, and so on. BH focused on the rear instead, which I found very interesting as it's a different concept. Then another success. From my point of view, everything related to nutrition management, transporting consumables, tools, and so on, which has basically been focused on nutrition. Carrying it in your clothing, not just in the 3 pockets of the jersey, but also in the 2 pockets of the bib shorts, which I find super useful. And then putting away everything related to the wrappers, which was also where all the tools and other stuff were kept. This SKS Germany bag appears to be the racer model. It weighs just 112 to 120 kilos plus 20 grams for the extra pouch we add. In terms of location and size, I found it perfect. I told you, I tried larger bags from the SKS catalog up here. For me, it didn't work here. I hit it with my knee getting up from the saddle. Here they're bulky when filling the frame, but this one remains compact. I wasn't bothered and carried everything I needed for 200 kilometers. So this is a setup that I think I'm going to keep if I do other long distance gravel races. Saddle? A key part as well in trying to delay the onset of fatigue in this case. My first time using a 3D printed saddle in a gravel race. And this Argo from Physics seemed incredible to me. In conjunction with the SRS from BH, it was just perfect. Look, just like I'm here, it's like I'm absorbing the whole saddle a bit. You just have to try it with your finger. And you can see how it somehow has that rigidity at the base, but the fabric on top is like a little cushion. So, well, everything adds up when it comes to gravel. The Favero Pro MX 2 pedals are also very important, where I have the power meter built in. Because really, in such a long distance race, my heart rate went through many different phases, just like myself and my body. Where I think there's a central part where I have a crisis, Thereafter, about 4 hours, my heart rate practically wouldn't go up. And if I had guided all my data collection about how I was doing in the race based on my heart rate, honestly, it would have been very hard to really understand how my body was doing. However, as you know, watts are constant in that sense, and being able to rely on them with these pedals, which will eventually come off this bike, be installed on another, and I'll keep having a power meter wherever I go with these pedals. Well, it's been an advantage when it comes to managing. Moments of difficulty when I was about to give up, when I thought things weren't going quite right, I focused on my pulse, but seeing the watts, I thought were doing fine and kept going. So that's an interesting point there. Very important to have electronic shifting, whether it's Shimano or SRAM. In this case, I have an 11-speed Shimano GRX, but try as much as possible to make it electronic because, once again, fatigue starts to set in. And where it shows up the most is in the areas close to the contact points with the bike, especially your butt and especially your hands and forearms. At the end of the race, already with 180, 190 km/h, shifting gears electronically is just pressing a button and making a subtle gesture. It was already tough, my forearms were already pretty worn out. I don't even want to imagine this with a mechanical shifter where you have to make that unnatural wrist movement. There comes a point, maybe on a downhill or when you're struggling, where it's very likely you'll end up with a cramp or something similar in your forearm. Whenever possible, choose bikes with electronic shifters and opt for electronic shifting as standard. I'm going to go over tire choice quickly here. I think it was the right one, even though there were areas with a lot of mud. Even if I had switched to a tire with more tread, like, I don't know, even if it was 40 millimeters, just like what I use with these Hutchinson Touareg tires, even if I had gone for something with more tread, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have had the same trouble in those areas, but with this tire, I still rode very well. I felt safe, no issues on descents. The wheels are Speed 6 player profile. And I think they gave me a smoother ride on the flats. They didn't hold me back at all on the climbs. So above all, they proved to be very durable. It was a race with a lot of breakdowns of all kinds, especially flat tires. And there were also some broken rims and blown hubs. You can see it was a very demanding race for the mechanics because in the end, unlike a mountain bike where the suspension basically absorbs everything, here the bike takes it all directly. And those impacts go to the hubs, to the axles, to the fork, to your body, and that makes the mechanics suffer a lot. What can I say? Reflection is very important. Always choose bikes that have a wide tire clearance, even if you're not going to use it. Imagine that the bike has a maximum tire clearance of 45 millimeters. You might think a 40 millimeter tire is enough and you'll never need a 45, but in this much mud, you can see why it's useful. Bikes that really struggled with narrow clearances because they would get clogged with mud, especially in the rear part, and they couldn't move. While others of us who had wider tire clearances didn't have any problems at all, right? So in that sense, always try to buy, acquire, or rent whatever it is. Bikes with the widest possible tire clearance, even if you're not going to use such wide tires. And with that said, let's move on to the mistakes. Let's look at the mistakes. Things I thought I had under control, but well, it seems that neither I nor many others were able to get it right. And it's about the bottle cages. On the first fast descent, when we were going at about 50-something kilometers per hour, bottles started flying out. One of them was mine. I mean, I thought these bottle cages would be strong enough. In fact, I had tested them for over 800 kilometers on the same routes. Hey, I don't know what happens on race day. There's more nerves, more adrenaline. The bottle went flying, and like I said, just like mine, a lot of others did too. I've often used a simple solution, like with Endesser ink, just use a bread twist tie. And you put it on the end of the bottle cage and the problem is solved. Or wrap the bottle with electrical tape. And that way, it has more resistance to flying out. But it's something to really keep in mind because it can completely alter your entire nutrition and hydration strategy for the race and cause a major setback. And then, I think the biggest mistake I've made, the lesson learned. On a positive note, the main thing I've gained from this mess, 200 has to do with the broadcast because I had been saying it in previous days. It's a race with a very complicated choice of gear ratio because we have 200 kilometers of which about 160 or 155 are completely flat. You must ride fast in a group with 2,500 meters of elevation gain. Most people, even those at the front, really good riders, had to walk because you didn't have a low enough gear to tackle it on the bike. Or maybe you could, but you'd use so many watts that it wasn't worth it. So for me, the first conclusion is that I made a mistake with this setup, which I changed to a single chain ring with 42 teeth in the front and a 4611 cassette in the back. I made a mistake because I wanted to play it safe. And to know that I would make it to the end of the race just fine, and that I would be able to handle the bike in any kind of situation. On the flats, climbs, and at the end, I found the single chainring fell too short on flats and the cassette fell too short on climbs. So in the end, I didn't have a good setup for any of the terrains. Why? Well, and this is where I tell you that this is something brands don't really talk about much yet, and there's a bit of a taboo around it. We'll discuss it ourselves. Gravel bikes, usually as standard, are coming with single chainring setups of 40 teeth and a cassette in the back. 1043 or 1142 more or less, depending on whether it's Shimano or SRAM, okay? It's a versatile type of gearing, mainly designed with a purpose, in my opinion. The cassette was too short for me, and the cassette was too short, and the cassette just wasn't enough for me. The cassette was too short. It was really too short for me. The cassette was really too short. It was just too short. It wasn't enough for me, and it was too short, and the cassette was too short for me, and the cassette was too short. And the cassette, that's why many people use a 51, 52, or 53 with a double chainring on the road. It's how they get around. Watts on the flat. Even very tall people use larger chain rings, as seen with professionals like Ganna and Max Pedersen. They use single chain rings with 58 or 60 teeth and are fine with it, since it's easier to turn a big chain ring than a small cog. That's something you need to be very clear about, always. So, with this setup, 42 tooth, single chain ring. If I go, I can only manage well on flat terrain, since I can maintain 30 to 32 kilometers per hour steadily. What happens when you're in a race, riding in a group, and you're going 40 kilometers per hour? What about when the group speeds up suddenly due to a puddle, direction change, curve, or something else? Instead of 40 now, you're going 45 or 47, and that's where this gear ratio falls completely short. And you end up spinning out on the flat, and there's no way to move forward, okay? With the 46 in back and the 49 and 42 up front on climbs over 20%, they hurt me because I climb at a high cadence, around 100 to 110 pedal strokes per minute, but with this setup, once it hit 15%, I would get stuck there, like at 60 or 70 pedal strokes per minute, which is very slow, and it destroys my lower body muscles. So I'm going to start trying out different setups from now on. Possible future gravel races that might come up where I use a bigger single chain ring. I'm thinking of a minimum of 46 teeth, maybe even 48, I don't know yet. I'll have to try it out depending on the terrain and where I end up putting a 52 tooth cassette in the back. And this way I can handle really tough climbs while still having power on the flats. It's clear that I'm going to lose out on the gear spacing because it's going to be bigger and more uncomfortable. Honestly, I think it's the only option now. Either that or a classified system that has an electromagnetic shifter inside the rear hub and lets you have the feeling of a double chain ring without having a physical front derailleur, so everything is inside the hub. It's impossible to break or have it fail mechanically, but it's very expensive. About 2,200 to 2,500 euros for the whole classified system, plus wheel adaptation. I'm not really interested. I'd rather find a big single chain ring. And they have no location. Double. Optimal plate by putting the curve with this armor, Protest Slorax. Funded Jogadaket, what about me? Well, with these muddy conditions, mechanical problems with the front derailleur everywhere, chain suck, derailleur obstructions. No, it's not a system that I think has a future in gravel today. The double chainring issue, for such a tough race and muddy conditions, definitely not. Now let's look at the interesting details, right? Let's see, how much does this baby weigh all covered in mud? Just as I finish the race. Here we go, bottles are full, pedals are on, we just need the cycle computer. The mud, of course, 11 kilos, 430 grams. Damn, it's gotten considerably heavier, I think it was. I don't remember if I weighed it before I got it running, but I think without pedals and water bottles, it was about 8 kilos, 800, something like that. And as for the tire pressures, well, you can see it here on the screen. I started the race with 26 pounds per square inch in the rear wheel, and there was a substantial difference by the time I finished. And well, the surprise is that there was also a change in the front wheel, where I started with 25.5 pounds per square inch. But it does seem that the biggest impacts or the biggest losses of air pressure happen. The rear wheel took the biggest hit, which in the end is the one that suffers the most. Why? Because that's where about 70% of our body weight goes. Well, all the conclusions we've reached so far are interesting. If you thought so too, please give the video a big like. Don't forget to follow the channel and hit the red subscribe button. That way you help my project grow and make me happy. See you next time. Bye.